For the love of rugby, brought to you by Blackheart, for those who ruck, maul, and never back down. Or, Tone, as I keep saying to you, mate, for those who duck, dive, weave, move, and have terrible backs. Mate, you've just got back from the States. How was your trip?
It was phenomenal, my friend. 25 degrees, sun out every day, fast food, in and out. Oh, mate, it was just phenomenal. Put on 5-6 kilos, so I'm going to be feeling that for the next few weeks. But mate, it was very, very good. Thank you. How's it been over here? You were in Norfolk, weren't you?
I was, mate. 5-6 kilos. I wouldn't know what that feels like. But yes, I've had a good time. All good. Half term. I've survived. I've got through the Fallow Week, England Fallow Week, of course, well timed from us both, but we're back in time just before the round 3 kicks off, mate, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, as Len, the Calcutta Cup is back, unfortunately. Not been in England's hands for a while, but let's hope that changes this week.
Colin and I spoke during the week, actually, Ant, about our most memorable and non-memorable moments against Scotland in the Calcutta Cup. What ones stand out for you?
There's a few. I mean, mate, the one that does the rounds every year and it cracks me up is JJ's hat-trick.
Yes.
And that's probably a standout memory for me. One, because, I mean, people don't know the backstory about that. He had actually been dropped the week before, I think, or dropped to the bench at least. And he had a lot of stuff going on off the field at that time. So, he had a lot of pressure on him going into that Scotland game. And one thing about JJ, as we both know, is that when the pressure's on, my man comes out flying, and he had a point to prove. So that one will always stand out to me as like a strong and fond Calcutta Cup memory. On the flip side, mate, the infamous game where Finn threw that ridiculous miss pass to Hugh Jones on the overs, that will stand out to me as one of the worst, because we got absolutely battered by Scotland in Scotland. And it was just all round extremely miserable. So, yeah, let's stick to the fond memories, I think. But, yeah, Calcutta Cups were usually, whilst we were playing Len, they were more often than not, they were good memories.
Mate, exactly. And we want some good memories this weekend. So if you look at it, like England going in with a bit of momentum and building, they managed to obviously get over the line against France when 20 minutes has been their Achilles heel. They found a way in the last 20. The French left the door open and England were good enough this time to take it. And then Scotland almost on the ropes a little bit, like not overly convincing against Italy, but got the job done. And then Ireland were like absolute test match masterclass, while Scotland had moments of absolute mayhem in terms of getting charged down, obviously losing Graham and Finn Russell early on didn't help, but they were just inviting pressure, but Ireland were outstanding. So you'd almost say Scotland are a little bit against the ropes. England are building with a bit of momentum. It's like suits us down to the ground, does it? Or is this actually when Scotland are the most dangerous?
Oh, mate, it's a tough one. I think that, just on what you just said there, I think looking at the Six Nations as an overall package, I think that's what makes it so interesting, is that like games like this one this weekend, both teams lost one. No one can categorically call it. Like some people are super confident for England win, some people are super confident for a Scotland win out of nowhere. There's no, I don't know, I don't see this one being like super everyone's on one side of the fence. Do you know what I mean? So it's really hard to gauge. I think that the momentum from England's game against France will give them so much confidence, especially given, like you said, Len, prior to that game, they'd lost 7 out of 9, only 2 wins coming against Japan, beating a very, very good France team who admittedly weren't their best on the day, still gives you a massive amount of confidence. And I think that will roll on and have a snowball effect for England going into this week. And I think on the reverse, I think that, yes, Scotland are definitely dangerous and you can never count them out when they've got a backline like they do. But I just think that, the win against Italy, they were expected to win, especially at home. And then Ireland was a real challenge. And I think that they're on opposite scales of the confidence spectrum. And I think that if you could choose, you would always rather go into a game away from home with more confidence as opposed to less. And so I'm very confident for an England victory this weekend. But it makes for an unbelievable game. And like I said, the amount of variance that there is in terms of opinions going into it is huge. And there's a few changes, mate. There's a few changes in the England setup. Obviously, Ches coming in for George, who's unfortunately had to drop out the squad now with that announcement that Ted Hill's coming in. But why do you think that they've gone in with him, mate? Why do you think that they've gone straight in with Ches to start now?
Yeah, Ollie Chesham obviously comes in for George Martin. George Martin has now, like you say, missed out, so Ted Hill comes in. I think Ted Hill's been banging at the door for a while now, so I hope he gets a good opportunity. He's obviously been in fine form for Bath for a number of seasons, and a lot of people are big fans of Ted Hill, I can see. I think sometimes when someone moves or, unfortunately miss that injury, it opens up the door for someone like Ted, who just needs a shot. So let's see how he goes. Now, why were they going with Ches? He was actually on Monday's episode, so you can listen to that if you want to hear from Ollie Chesham. It was well timed. It's like we predicted the future with him coming on our Monday episode. But when you look at the Sage Insights, Ollie Chesham won the joint most steals out of anyone in last year's Six Nations. He won 3. And one of the things that England haven't quite nailed is their line-out. And the line-out looked way better when Ollie came on at the back end against France. He is very athletic, so quick in the air, and his movement's very, very good. He's more of a dynamic, athletic sort of lock, where you look at George Martin. George Martin's way more sort of abrasive, big old school lump, sort of hitting things, banging rucks, doing carries, of course. But Ches is just better, sort of like that dynamic, sort of like in the wider channels, can carry, like more, suppose, agile than George. Doesn't hit like George does. George hits like an absolute monster. Ches doesn't have that part of his game, but what he does do is have the dynamic part. So 1, it shores up England's line-out. 2, Scotland move the ball a lot, and I just think Ches can cover the ground so well that I just think it just helps that the dynamic movement that they need, and then George can almost come on the back end of the game, or would have come on. But now someone like Ted Hill is actually quite similar to Ollie Chesham. So it's like for like, again, someone that's great in the wide channels, can cover the ground very, very well, very athletic. And when you look at England's back row selection again, I think Willis can obviously jump in the line out, but Benny Earl and Tom Curry aren't jumpers. So therefore, although they can use Tom Willis in the line out, like a lot's going to fall on Chesham and Merwe still. So Ches is just a great option. And I just think it will shore up that line out, which has been a little bit underwhelming, but a lot of that's been because of the back row that England have been going with, and therefore your options are limited, as we discussed before Ireland.
Yeah, definitely, Len. I think Ches, and he showed, what a class player he is when he came on, I think, against France. He got through a mountain of work, and I think that that's probably a difference maker between Ches and other second rows, is just the sheer amount of work that he gets through. And, I think he's one of those players, mate, that you don't really appreciate until they're on your team. I remember watching him whilst I was at Bath and thinking, not that he was ordinary, but not thinking a great deal about him. And then when you train with someone and you play with them week in, week out, you see how valuable they are to the team, and you see how much that they bring. And Ches is one of those guys where he just gets through so much work, and he does so much unseen stuff that doesn't always necessarily get the plaudits and the recognition that it deserves. So I'm super happy for him. I'm super happy for the team, obviously, that he's going straight back in. But it's rough. It's rough that George has to drop out for him to come in. And, that's a really strange dynamic, having a teammate and a good friend of yours that's in your position, but they're good lads and they manage it both pretty well. So, yeah, it's definitely an area of the game to watch out for this weekend.
And it seems as well, Ant, that Ted Hill was the obvious choice to come in. I think some people might have thought, do they go with another lock option? But I think one thing, Ted Hill can cover lock if he needs be. Not ideal, he's more of a 6. But I suspect Chesham and I suspect Merwe to go the 80 if they can, to be honest with you. And I think if they unleash Ted Hill, you obviously got Chandler Cunningham himself as well, then I still think it'll be a back row option rather than putting them in the putting either of them in the second row. The other thing as well to mention with Ollie is I think he's got a great leadership attributes already, and I think he's definitely a future captain of Leicester. And I think the presence that he brings in terms of his comms, the noise and energy he brings around the field, and those communications, again, is key, especially defensively, because Scotland go multi-phase. And one of the areas that concerns me a little bit, and having watched England over the the first 2 rounds, and they've had 2 weeks to lead into this game. So I'm sure it will be better than what we've seen. But the one bit that concerns me, and I'm confident this weekend, I think England will have more than enough to win. But the one bit that I'm just a little bit like, we're still a bit vulnerable, is just our edge defence. You know, France exploited our edge a number of times and we still look vulnerable there. And Scotland are the best at getting the ball to the edge. With the distribution of passing that Russell has, with Kinghorn coming in and being that extra distributor as well and hitting those lines, you know, Scotland get the ball to the wider channels. And I'm a little bit worried that we haven't quite nailed that aspect of our defensive system yet. The defensive system's changed, it's looking stronger, a little bit more watertight, definitely, but the edge is still a bit of concern, especially given that that's one of Scotland's key parts of how they play.
Yeah, and I think that, to be honest with you, Len, that probably ties in to a bit of the selection dilemma we were talking about in terms of Ches coming in. You probably want your most athletic team out there, as in agile athleticism out there as much as possible against a team like Scotland who move the ball and can get through a load of work like I just said Ches does. So I think that's a really good point, mate. And I think it ties into why England have selected how they've selected. And as we know, and we've said numerous times on this podcast, Steve does everything with selection, game plan, tactics, and opposition in mind. So I've got no doubt that's played a factor.
He certainly does. And he's also gone with the Smiths again. So they're getting another shot at it, Ant. And it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works again, because there was lots of pleasing signs of it, of course, against France, but a different challenge this week. So when you look at Scotland's kicking game, for instance, and you'll be able to talk about this way more better than me, having been in the backfield, but I thought about, perhaps they'll put Tom Willis back in the backfield off kickoffs and things like that, like Safka did with Dwayne Vermeulen. Perhaps Tommy Freeman will drop from when Scotland are coming out of their half to secure that high ball. So I'll be interested to know your thoughts on this and how England do it, and do they try and protect Smith, because you don't want to lose him also in the first breakdown. If you lose Marcus Smith and they do a box kick and he goes up and he catches it, he's now in that first breakdown. And if England are trying to launch structural attack from a kick return, you need Marcus on his feet. That's the whole point of having a distributing guy at fullback. So therefore it sort of defeats the purpose of then him catching it. So I'd be interested to know what you think to how they might do the backfield and what people to look out for, because when you look at Scotland's kicking game, it's short. And with lots of kicks coming from Russell and Ben White and the Sage Insights, Scotland have the lowest kick total distance of 1,282 metres and the lowest total kick territory gained of 1,095 metres. So in layman's terms for listeners, they kick contestable. France didn't. So it's a different challenge this week for Marcus.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing to note is that Finn Russell loves those kick passes across the field, and that poses a difficult challenge for the wingers. We've spoken about it a bit on the pod before around your positioning and kind of playing mind games with your fly half, sitting off, sitting up, showing them something that you're going to do differently. So that'll be a big thing for the wingers this weekend. But to answer your question with regards to the fullback and Marcus and so on, I think that they might drop Tom Willis or Ben Al back there, but I don't think it's a prerequisite or it's absolutely necessary. And I only say that because Marcus is one of the best broken field runners in the world. And whether they kick contestable or not, he's going to have the opportunity to take people on, because you'll know as a scrum half how difficult it is to put that kick on the money. And, you know, it has to be on the money for them to, one, either get up and compete with Marcus, or two, wait for him to land and hit him man and ball. And all you need against a guy like Marcus is a split second delay between him catching the ball and being tackled for him to break a tackle and be off. And so I don't think he's someone that they need to hide or do anything around the backfield, because one, he's actually decent in the air, and also it's very difficult to hide someone in the backfield nowadays, especially with a 10 like Finn Russell, who, you know, if they situate him behind the box kick, then they'll box kick. And if they situate him on the other side or flip, which we've seen Freddie Stewart do so well, if they flip him to the other side, then Finn Russell will just go to the crossfield. So it's really difficult to hide someone in the backfield nowadays. And when you add on top of that the new rules around, you know, chasers coming through, I don't think that they're going to have to do that or want to do that. So, yeah, it's definitely a different challenge, but Marcus is the type of guy who just wants the ball in his hands. He doesn't care where he gets it from. He doesn't care if it's a contestable or if it's whatever. He's going to try and make something happen. So I don't think it affects a massive amount for England. I think Marcus will be able to deal with it. And in terms of, what you're saying there about the ball playing perspective, I think that the reason why a lot of teams have a second distributor in their team at fullback is more for multi-phase as opposed to kick return, because it's really difficult to create shape immediately off kick return. So teams, will often look to have that second distributor there as it goes to 4, 5, 6 phases, because that's when you can get the 10 linking with the fullback and they're both on their feet and so on and so forth. So I don't think it changes a massive amount. And I think that, it'll be a challenge that Marcus will relish, and rightly so.
I'll just be interested to see that against France, they obviously kicked long. They used Bennell on the backfield. They got to the middle of the field, almost tried to create two-sided attack with both Smiths on their feet. With Scotland kicking short, I'm just intrigued whether there is some tactical mix-up that England do and try and change it up, whether they allow Marcus, like you say, and just to go and claim the ball, go win it in the air and off they go, or whether they actually do try and do a subtle change. You're right, absolutely right. If he start moving him, if the box kick's being set up and he switches over to the far 15, Finn Russell will just overcall it and go kick it on him anyway. So you can't protect him the whole time. It's not even about protecting, it's about, are England willing to try and keep him on his feet to both distribute, or they're going to do the same as France, try and get to the middle of the field and have two-sided attack. So
I'll tell you,
I think it's going to be interesting, but I'm excited to see those guys go at it again.
Yeah, sorry, Len, sorry to jump in there. I think that just thinking about it even more now, I think that what they could do, if they wanted to keep both, ball players on their feet immediately from kick return and maybe take away some of that competitiveness in the air, is the one thing they could do is from a kickoff, they could put Marcus to, let's say, the opposite wing to whichever they kick to. That way they have, let's just say, they put Slightholme on the right wing for the chase. So they kick to the right, Ollie Slightholme chases, makes a tackle. Scotland inevitably, more often than not, will resort to a box kick. And in that situation, you could put Tommy Freeman at the back there. He claims it in the air, and then Marcus can swing away from his wing into a position where he can be a second distributor and push either Ollie Lawrence or Slady to the edge. There's a lot of moving parts to that, but that is a way that they could get both distributors on their feet immediately from kick return. I just think that it's too many moving parts, isn't it, Len? To resort to that, and I think that Marcus is more than good enough in the air to deal with that, and it takes away some of the strengths of Ollie Slightholme, having him on the edge. So it's always give and take, and I don't think that it's worth taking strengths away to have a second distributor in there for one phase, You also, if you're moving him around so much, that does suggest that you don't really back him as a fullback. Do you know what I mean? You've moved him there to be a fullback. So therefore, if you're moving him around left, right and centre, then you don't really see him as a fullback. You just see him as a better option right now. So interesting. We'll see it all happen. But one thing I want to ask, Ant, and we've got a question from Gav, because I want to ask something similar. How can a player like Marcus Smith play fullback as well as a player like Blair Kinghorn, who's obviously a 6 foot odd? Is it just a more versatile position, same as Freddie? Because you do have Damien McKenzie's played there for New Zealand, of course. You've obviously got Villy LaRue at South Africa. You got Keenan in Ireland. Then you look at someone like Freddie Stewart, who's obviously so tall. Blair Kinghorn, who's very, very tall. Mm-hmm. What is it about that position and that you kind of get different shapes and sizes? Well, I think, Len, I wouldn't even look at it as a fullback in isolation. I would actually look at it as a back three, as a group. The different shapes and sizes that you get out there is probably more than any other back. Nines, as we know, Len, are traditionally and more commonly than not pretty small. Tens, there's a bit more variation, but more often than not, they're not the biggest guy out there, and they're, the variation in size is reduced, and the same with the centres. In the back three, you've got everything from the guys like Nemani Nadolo to Cheslin Colby, and I think fullback is no different to that. In that there's just so much variance in terms of the differences that they can bring to the game. When you're at fullback, you've got more opportunity to counter attack. So it just depends onto which your game plan and your selection criteria favours. Do you favour a fullback who's extremely strong in the air, like a Freddie Stewart, who's going to win it back or win it 90% of the time? Or do you favour someone who's going to make something happen from the fullback position, who's going to counter-attack with purpose and break the line and potentially spark things from the back there? So it's kind of whichever your game plan suits more and which I guess framework you want to go down. So it varies, but I think that the back three as a whole varies in that same vein.
And that's great insight. And should we move on to Scotland?
Yeah, let's do it, Len. I've got a question for you, actually, mate, because there's so many personnel across Scotland who could be deemed as pivotal. But who do you reckon is Scotland's key man for the game? Because obviously you could talk about Finn, you could talk about Kinghorn from the back, you can talk about Duhan, you could talk about Zander Fagerson. There's so many to choose from. Who do you think is pivotal to Scotland's success this weekend?
There is a good few, Tone. And, obviously Finn Russ, as I mentioned before, really, about the edge, our edge defence is a little bit vulnerable, I think. So Finn Russell, of course, springs to mind, and he does to everyone. But the guy that has been tearing down trees for Scotland, and I can't wait for the matchup that he has against Ben Earl and, of course, Tom Curry. But that is Rory Darge. Like, he is fast becoming Scotland's key man, but almost under the radar key man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the evidence is backed up in the Sage Insights. So Darge has made joint most offloads with 5, most attacking rucks arrivals with 65, and most dominant tackles with 6. And that doesn't even include, obviously, the jackal threat that he brings. So, look, his showdown with Ben Earl and Tom Curry is going to be fantastic. You know, Scotland will... The way that they defend, and this is another thing for people to look out for, is they actually fill the field really well, and they get off the line, but not like crazy line speed, and they try and create as many two-man tackles as possible. But it's not two-man tackles in terms of chop them low and they get them to the ground really, really quickly. A lot of the time, it's about trying to actually wrestle up top, and what I mean by that is to get two guys in the tackle, isn't it right, Ant? And as the attacker runs in, two defenders almost like pincer in from both sides and try and wrestle and try and buy as much time in the tackle and make the breakdown and that whole collision as slow as possible. And then they just fill the field really quite nicely. And then you have someone like Darge that almost has free reign to just try and jackal and do all that. So, they take a bit of breaking down Scotland. And then when you add in his threat with the ball and without it, of course, it kind of coincides that he's a threat when he's defending with his dominant tackle and getting over the ball, but he's also key to their attack, and they go multi-phase and they build it that way. So although for all the glitz and glamour that you see of Scotland's attack at times and how well they do it with their structured plays and the way they move the ball, actually Ireland showed that you can break them down. But what England have actually struggled against in the past against Scotland is because they fill the field and two men in the tackle slow it down. And because England, after free phase, if they don't get momentum, they resort to that kicking game, either try and contest and create an unstructured through contestable kicks or attacking kicks. And it'll be interesting to see whether they're able to create speed of ball, get momentum, and go multi-phase, or whether Scotland deal with England like they have maybe in the past, which is fill the field, loads of time in the tackle, slowing it down, and England almost having to resort to that kicking game, which then almost feeds Scotland's attack.
Yeah, mate, I had the privilege of working with Steve Tandy on the Lions tour, and he is a very, very astute coach. He knows his onions. And you're right, mate, about teams that fill the field. It almost tricks you into thinking, I've got no idea where the space is. And, especially like you said, when you've got players like Pierre Schoeman, Zander Fagerson, Jack Dempsey, Rory Darge, big guys up top who can hold you up, slow the ball down. As a 10 or as a 9 or as a back, you look up and you think, where the heck is the space? Because they've slowed the ball down so much that they've had a chance to fill the field. They'd have a chance to look up and get the numbers right. And that's what he bases a lot of his defence on. So it's very difficult for attacks to break down. And it's why guys like Ches getting through a mountain of work, Merwe, all those guys in the forward pack, getting through a lot of work and getting that speed of ball is going to be key for England's attack and breaking down that Scottish defence. But it's no easy task. Scotland, like you said, Len, have shored up in that area. and they've got the personnel to back it up.
England have to play low to the ground and try and smash that ruck when they're attacking. Any slight upright carries, like, they're going to deal with it. Just give us a bit more of an insight. And obviously, as you say, you got coached by him on the Lions tour.
Mm-hmm.
Is it very much two-man tackle as much as possible? Try and slow you down that way. So rather than slow you down with necessarily jackals, apart from the guys that can jackal, it is two-man in, slow you down that way, and it buys everyone time to fill the field, as you just mentioned, and then just go again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, as an edge player, our focus is a lot different. But I saw a lot of the forwards spending time on making sure that their alignment was correct so that they could get two-man tackles. And we spent a fair amount of time doing contact conditioning, which involved some form of wrestling or, that kind of upright contact-based stuff. So it's definitely a key part of Tan's framework and tactics. But as a coach, he's just one of those guys that can explain things in such a way that it makes it very simple for players to understand. And in defence, it can be overcomplicated sometimes. But he's very, very good at dumbing it down for guys like me who just need one thing to think about. And he's a very, very good coach. Wouldn't be surprised, I've seen all the names thrown into the hat for the Lions, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him go again. He was a very, very good coach.
And also, Darcy Graham is out, and he's a proper game breaker for Scotland. However, Duhan van der Merwe is playing, and he seems to love playing against England and scored some freakish tries. Like, how do England stop this guy?
Does my head in, mate. I saw some numbers the other day of tries he scored. I don't know sure if it was in the Six Nations or against Six Nations opponents, but he scored 7 tries against England. Like, mate, that is berserk. Because they're not traditionally games that are blown away and teams are going away putting 40 points on each other, or it's a really high scoring game. So for him to have 7 is different. In terms of how he can be stopped, I think that England have probably got to try and kick contestable on him. They've probably got to try and get him in the air, get him out of his flow, cut down all of his time and space. Because we saw 2 years ago, where you give him time and space on counter-attack, he's going to make something happen. So you can't give him that time and space. You've got to, if he gets the ball, he's got to be cut down immediately. If you kick to him, it's got to be contestable, so that either he has to get up in the air or you're tackling him man and ball. But those are the only ways, mate. Like, if he gets running, he's going to be tough to stop. We know that. If he gets the ball on the edge with 10, 15 metres either side of him, he's going to be tough to stop. So those are the ways that I would suggest. I think from a larger perspective, you want to stop Scotland getting it to the edge, which, as we know, Lenny, is a strength of theirs. So, if you can press high enough on the edges to stop them throwing it over the top, or stop them getting the ball to Duhan with a bunch of space, that'll be another way. And a lot of that relies on the forward pack slowing their ball down, getting turnovers, and kind of stopping Scotland getting in their flow and rhythm. So those would be the I guess larger perspective ways of stopping him. But from an individual one-on-one perspective for Tommy Freeman, who's one of the best defenders out there, I'll add, for his roles and responsibilities stopping him, he's just got to get on him man and ball as much as possible. Don't give him time and space to put on some footwork or get up and going, because as he gets flowing, he's tough to stop. Right,
predictions times, Tone. So there's our sort of insight to look out for. Some key players for Scotland and how we try and stop them. Some bits that England can get after, and some things to be aware of. So, what are you going with?
I'm going with 28-15 England. I don't know if I want to add more to explain why, because it could bite me in the ass, but I'm going to stick with that. 28-15.
Love that from you. I am going to go for an England win. I think that they'll do the business. Get the cup back, put it in the cabinet, and happy days. Scoreline, I can't give a scoreline prediction, but I feel like England are going to win. And I think they'll win. No, I think they'll win quite convincingly in the end. So bring it on. The POM squad will be released. They'll do the business again in the last 20 minutes, led by Jamie George. And away they go. So best of luck to the boys.